The ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. It was small compared to the massive stations floating around it. Ambassador David Park stood near the window, watching the alien citadel grow larger as they approached. His heart was beating fast, but his face showed nothing. He had trained for this moment his entire life. Behind him, Lieutenant Emma Collins checked her tablet one more time. She was young, only 28 years old, but she was one of the smartest officers in the diplomatic corps. David had chosen her himself for this mission. "Sir, we will dock in 10 minutes, Emma said. David nodded but did not turn around. He kept looking at the citadel. It was beautiful in a strange way. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue and purple light. Towers rose from its surface like frozen flames. This was the heart of galactic civilization. This was where the Galactic Council met to decide the fate of entire species. And today, they would decide the fate of humanity. David finally turned to face Emma. He was 52 years old, with gray hair at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. Those lines came from years of difficult negotiations, sleepless nights, and the weight of carrying humanity's hopes on his shoulders. "Emma," he said quietly, "whatever happens in there, I need you to remember something." "Sir?" "If things go wrong, you run. You get to the escape pod, and you run. Do not look back. Do not try to help me. Just run and tell Earth what happened." Emma frowned. "Sir, nothing is going to go wrong. This is a peaceful diplomatic mission. They invited us here." David smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "They invited us here to reject us. I have read the intelligence reports. The Council does not want humanity to join them. They think we are too violent, too unpredictable. This meeting is just a formality. Then why are we here? Because we have to try. Because maybe, just maybe, I can change their minds. And because humanity needs to show the galaxy that we are willing to reach out our hand in friendship, even when we know it might be slapped away." The ship shuddered gently as it connected to the docking port. David straightened his uniform and picked up the ceremonial tablet. It contained humanity's formal petition for membership in the Galactic Council. Millions of people had worked on that document. It represented the best of what humanity had to offer. The airlock opened, and they stepped into the citadel. The air smelled strange, like flowers and metal mixed together. The walls pulsed with soft light as they walked down the long corridor. Alien guards stood on both sides, watching them with eyes that held no warmth. David counted 12 different species among the guards. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of something that was not quite solid. They reached the council chamber after walking for nearly 20 minutes. The doors were massive, at least 50 feet tall, and they opened silently as David and Emma approached. The chamber was enormous. It could have held a small city inside it. In the center was a raised platform where the 12 members of the Galactic Council sat in their designated places. Each one represented a species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. David walked to the petitioner's circle, a small spot on the floor that was the only place where non-council species were allowed to stand. Emma stopped a few steps behind him, holding her tablet tightly. High Arbiter Thornax was the first to speak. He was the leader of the Varth Collective, the oldest and most powerful species in the council. His body was made of living crystal that shifted colors as he moved. His voice sounded like glass breaking slowly. "Human, you come before the Galactic Council to present your species' petition for membership. Speak." David bowed his head respectfully. "High Arbiter, honored members of the Council, I am Ambassador David Park of Earth. I come before you today to represent the 8 billion humans who call our world home, and the millions more who have spread to Mars and beyond." He lifted the ceremonial tablet. "This document contains our petition. It outlines our history, our achievements, and our hopes for the future. We know that humanity is young compared to the great civilizations represented here. We know that our past contains violence and war. But we have learned from our mistakes. We have united our world. We have reached for the stars not to conquer, but to explore, to learn, and to find friendship among the peoples of the galaxy. Thornax's crystal body flickered with cold light. You speak of peace, human. Yet our records show that your species has waged war upon itself for thousands of years. You developed weapons capable of destroying your entire planet. You have killed millions of your own kind over differences in belief, territory, and resources. What assurance can you give this council that you will not bring your violence to the stars? David had expected this question. He had prepared for it. High Arbiter, everything you say is true. Humanity's history is written in blood. But that same history also contains stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. We have learned to overcome our worst instincts. We have built a united Earth where war between nations is no longer possible. We offer ourselves not as perfect beings, but as a species that has faced its darkness and chosen to walk toward the light. The council members exchanged glances that David could not read. Some of them seemed thoughtful. Others seemed disgusted. Thornax's expression, if a being of living crystal could have an expression, was cold and hostile. The council will deliberate, Thornax announced. You will wait in the antechamber. David bowed again and walked out of the chamber with Emma beside him. The doors closed behind them with a heavy sound. They waited. Minutes turned into hours. Emma tried to make conversation, but David was silent, lost in thought. He knew something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. The guards outside the antechamber had doubled in number. Their weapons were no longer holstered. 7 hours passed before the doors opened again. The council summons the human petitioners, a guard announced. David stood and walked back into the chamber. Emma followed. As they entered, David noticed that the lighting had changed. The soft blue and purple glow had been replaced by harsh red light. The council members were all staring at him with expressions he could now read clearly, hatred, fear, and something else, judgment. The council has reached a decision, Thornax said. His voice was no longer cold. It was filled with cruel satisfaction. Humanity's petition for membership is denied. Your species will remain under quarantine until such time as the council decides otherwise. David's heart sank, but he kept his face calm. I understand, High Arbiter. We are disappointed, but we respect the council's decision. We will return to Earth and— You misunderstand, human, Thornax interrupted. You will not be returning to Earth. Your presence in this citadel constitutes a violation of Quarantine Protocol 7. The penalty for this violation is death. Time seemed to stop. David heard Emma gasp behind him. He saw the guards raising their weapons. He understood in that terrible moment that this had been a trap all along. They had never intended to consider humanity's petition. They had lured him here to send a message. David Park had 3 seconds to act. He did not hesitate. He spun around, grabbed Emma by the shoulders, and threw her toward the small emergency exit he had noticed when they first entered the chamber. Run! He screamed. Emma stumbled but found her feet. She looked back at David, her eyes wide with horror. Go! David shouted. Tell Earth what happened. Tell them. The weapons fired. Bright beams of energy struck David's body from 6 different directions. He felt no pain, only a strange warmth spreading through him. The ceremonial tablet fell from his hands and shattered on the floor. The last thing David Park saw was Emma disappearing through the emergency exit. She had escaped. She would tell Earth. That was enough. He fell to the floor of the council chamber, and everything went dark. In the escape pod racing away from the citadel, Emma Collins screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw. She screamed for David, for humanity, for the hope that had died in that chamber. But beneath her grief, something else was growing. Something cold and hard. Rage. Earth would know what happened here. And Earth would respond. The galaxy had just made the worst mistake in its 12,000-year history. The escape pod crashed in the Pacific Ocean 3 weeks after Emma Collins fled the alien citadel. Recovery teams found her dehydrated, starving, and clutching a small recording device in her hands. She had not let go of it the entire journey home. It contained the last moments of Ambassador David Park's life. Emma spent 2 days in a military hospital. Doctors tried to make her rest, but she refused to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's body falling to the floor. She saw the bright beams of energy tearing through him. She heard his final scream telling her to run. On the 3rd day, Secretary General Michael Thompson came to see her personally. Thompson was 64 years old. He had served in politics for 3 decades, surviving scandals, wars, and crises that would have destroyed lesser men. His hair was completely gray now, and deep wrinkles lined his face. But his eyes were still sharp, still burning with intelligence and determination. He sat beside Emma's hospital bed and took her hand gently. "Tell me everything," he said. Emma told him. She started from the beginning, from the moment they left Earth, and she did not stop until she reached the end. When she described David's death, her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. Thompson needed to know. Earth needed to know. When she finished, Thompson was silent for a long time. His face had turned to stone during her story. Only his eyes showed what he was feeling, and what Emma saw in them frightened her. It was rage. Pure, cold, terrible rage. "They murdered him," Thompson said quietly. "They invited him to a peace conference, and they murdered him like an animal." "Yes, sir." Thompson stood up slowly. "Can you walk, Lieutenant Collins?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Get dressed. The United Earth Assembly is meeting in 1 hour. They need to hear your testimony." 1 hour later, Emma stood before the most powerful gathering of humans in existence. The assembly chamber in Geneva was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and diplomats filled the seats, all staring at the young woman on the central platform. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the recording from her device. The assembly watched in silence as David Park made his petition for peace. They watched as Thornax pronounced the death sentence. They watched as David threw Emma toward the exit and screamed at her to run. They watched as he died. When the recording ended, many of the delegates were crying. Some were shaking with anger. A few had left their seats and were pacing along the walls, unable to sit still. Secretary General Thompson stood at the central podium. "You have all seen what happened," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. Ambassador David Park went to the Galactic Council in peace. He carried no weapons. He made no threats. He offered only friendship and hope. And they murdered him for it. He paused, letting his words sink in. "The question before this assembly is simple. What do we do now?" Admiral Jennifer Wright stood from the military section. She was 51 years old, with short gray hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. She had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 30 years. She had commanded fleets, won battles, and buried friends. David Park had been one of those friends. "Sir," she said, "we have options." Thompson looked at her. "What options, Admiral?" "The Galactic Council controls 1,000 star systems. They have technologies we cannot understand. Their combined fleet numbers in the tens of thousands. We have Earth, Mars, a few colonies, and maybe 500 warships." Admiral Wright walked to the central platform and activated her own holographic display. A complex diagram appeared, showing a network of satellites, stations, and weapons platforms surrounding Earth and stretching throughout the solar system. Sir, we have extermination protocol. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted questions and objections. Some demanded explanations. Others demanded that Wright be silenced immediately. Extermination protocol was humanity's darkest secret. It had been created 50 years ago, during the early days after first contact, when humanity first realized how dangerous the galaxy truly was. The project had consumed trillions of dollars and the work of humanity's greatest scientists. And when it was complete, it had been locked away, hidden from the public, deemed too terrible ever to use. Thompson raised his hand, and the chamber slowly fell silent. Dr. Lee, he said, please come forward. A woman in her late 40s stood from the science section. Dr. Rachel Lee was the head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division. Her father, Dr. James Lee, had created extermination protocol. He had died 10 years ago, believing his creation would never be used. Rachel walked to the platform. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. The protocol is operational, she said. It has always been operational. My father designed it to be ready at a moment's notice. All it requires is the proper authorization codes. Thompson stared at her. What exactly does it do? Rachel took a deep breath. Extermination protocol is not a single weapon. It is a complete weapons system designed to defeat any enemy, regardless of their technological advantage. It uses principles that my father discovered through decades of research. Principles that the older galactic races dismissed as impossible. She activated another display, showing complex equations and diagrams that most of the delegates could not understand. In simple terms, sir, it allows us to unmake matter at the quantum level. We can destroy anything, ships, stations, planets. There is no defense against it because it does not use conventional energy or projectiles. It simply tells the atoms in a target to stop existing, and they do. The chamber was completely silent. Thompson closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed in his face. The politician was gone. In his place stood something older and more dangerous. A leader preparing for war. Send a message to the Galactic Council, he said. Tell them they have one standard galactic cycle to surrender the individuals responsible for Ambassador Park's murder. Tell them they must formally apologize to humanity and grant us full recognition as an equal species. Tell them that if they refuse, we will show them why they should have feared us. Admiral Wright saluted. Yes, sir. As the assembly began preparing for what was to come, Emma Collins remained on the platform. She was no longer crying. The grief that had consumed her during the journey home had transformed into something else entirely. David Park had asked her to tell Earth what happened. She had done that. But now she understood that her mission was not complete. She would see this through to the end. She would watch as humanity delivered its answer to the Galactic Council, and she would make sure that David's death meant something not far away. In the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council Citadel, High Arbiter Thornax received humanity's ultimatum. He read it twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he laughed. It was the last time he would laugh for a very long time. High Arbiter Thornax called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. The 12 members gathered in the Great Chamber, the same chamber where David Park had died 3 weeks earlier. The bloodstains had been cleaned, but Thornax could still see exactly where the human had fallen. It pleased him. My fellow council members, Thornax began, his crystalline body glowing with amusement. I have received a message from the humans. They are making demands. He projected the message for all to see. The council members read it in silence. Some of them reacted with confusion. Others reacted with anger. A few seemed nervous, but most of them laughed. They demand that we apologize? said Grand Marshal Vectis of the Drawn Empire. His massive armored body shook with amusement. They demand that we surrender ourselves to their justice? These insects dare to threaten the Galactic Council? It appears they do, Thornax replied. They claim to have weapons capable of defeating our combined fleets. They give us one galactic cycle to comply with their demands. Absurd, said Lady Morinth of the Shale Dominion. Her serpentine form coiled tighter around her seat. What could these primitives possibly possess that could threaten us? They have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. We have ruled the stars for 12,000 years. The laughter continued, but one voice did not join it. Ambassador Kira of the Malari Federation sat quietly in her seat, studying the human message. She was the youngest member of the council, appointed only 50 years ago. Her people were known for their caution and their wisdom. They did not laugh at threats, no matter how unlikely they seemed. Perhaps we should not dismiss this so quickly, Kira said. The laughter stopped. All eyes turned to her. Explain yourself, Thornax demanded. Kira stood slowly. Her body was humanoid, but covered in soft blue feathers that shifted colors as she moved. Her eyes were large and golden, designed for seeing things that others missed. We have observed humanity for 50 years, she said. We have studied their history, their culture, their technology, and in all that time, we have never fully understood them. What is there to understand? Vectis growled. They are violent primitives who nearly destroyed their own planet with nuclear weapons. Yes, Kira agreed. They are violent, but they are also innovative in ways we cannot predict. They think differently than we do. They solve problems in ways that our scientists call impossible. She activated her own holographic display, showing charts and graphs that detailed humanity's technological development. In 200 years, they went from wooden sailing ships to spacecraft. In 50 years after discovering nuclear fission, they had landed on their moon. In the 50 years since first contact, they have developed technologies that our observers cannot explain. Such as? Thornax asked, his voice dripping with contempt. We do not know, Kira admitted. That is precisely my point. Their military development has been completely hidden from our observation. They knew we were watching them, so they moved their weapons research underground into facilities we could not penetrate. We have no idea what they have built. Thornax's crystal body flickered with irritation. You suggest that we should be afraid of these creatures? That we should bow to their demands because of what they might have created? I suggest that we should be cautious, Kira replied. The cost of being wrong is too high. Thornax turned to face the rest of the council. We have heard Ambassador Kira's concerns. Now let us vote. Who believes we should comply with humanity's demands? No hands were raised. Even Kira did not vote for compliance, knowing it would be pointless. And who believes we should teach these insects their proper place in the galaxy? Every hand rose except Kira's. Then it is decided, Thornax announced. Grand Marshal Vectis, you will assemble the combined fleet, 10,000 ships from all council species. You will proceed to the human home system and destroy them utterly. Leave no survivors. Let this be a lesson to any species that dares to threaten the Galactic Council. Vectis rose and saluted. It will be my pleasure, High Arbiter. As the council members departed to prepare for war, Kira remained in her seat. She stared at the spot where David Park had died, thinking about the expression on his face in his final moments. He had not been afraid. He had been determined. He had saved his aide and accepted his death without begging or pleading. She had seen many species face death. Very few had faced it like that. She wondered if the council truly understood what they had awakened. 3 days later, the combined fleet departed for human space. 10,000 warships, representing the military might of 12 civilizations. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Each ship was armed with weapons that had conquered countless worlds. Each crew was trained to perfection. They expected no real resistance. The journey to Earth would take 3 days. The destruction of humanity would take perhaps an hour. Then they would return home to celebrate their easy victory. On Earth, Secretary General Thompson received word of the fleet's departure. He was in the command center beneath Geneva, surrounded by screens showing the positions of human forces throughout the solar system. Admiral Wright stood beside him. "They're coming," she said. 10,000 ships. They'll be here in 72 hours. Thompson nodded slowly. "They didn't even consider our demands. They just laughed and sent their fleet. Did you expect anything different, sir?" "No." Thompson turned to face his admiral. "I hoped. David would have wanted me to hope. But I knew they would refuse." He walked to the central console, where a single red button glowed under a protected glass cover. "Admiral Wright, by the authority granted to me as Secretary General of United Earth, I am ordering the activation of Extermination Protocol." Wright saluted. "Authorization code required, sir." Thompson typed in a long sequence of numbers and letters. The glass cover slid open. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising. He pressed the button. Throughout the solar system. He pressed the button. Through the button. Through the button. Throughout the solar system. In bunkers on Earth and Mars, in hidden stations among the asteroids, in satellites orbiting every planet, systems that had been sleeping for 50 years suddenly came awake. Dr. Rachel Lee watched from her laboratory as her father's creation stirred to life. Screens that had been dark for decades began glowing with power readings that seemed impossible. Weapons platforms that had looked like ordinary debris began repositioning themselves along calculated trajectories. "Father," she whispered, "I hope you were right about this." The extermination protocol was fully operational. In 3 days. The combined fleet would arrive expecting an easy victory. They would find something very different waiting for them. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 10,000 warships appeared in perfect formation, their weapons already charging, their crews eager for battle. Admiral Vex of the Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and looked at the human home system with contempt. "Report," he commanded. His sensor officer, a small creature with too many eyes, studied his screens for a moment. Then he grew very still. "Admiral, I am detecting unusual readings." "What kind of readings?" "Unknown energy signatures throughout the system. Thousands of them. They are coming from satellites, orbital platforms, and hidden stations. The power output is..." "Admiral, this cannot be correct." Vex walked to the sensor station and looked at the readings himself. What he saw made no sense. The energy signatures were massive, far larger than anything a primitive species like humanity should possess. Each one exceeded the output of his flagship's main reactor by a factor of 1,000. "It must be an error," Vex said. "Recalibrate your sensors." "I have recalibrated them 3 times, Admiral. The readings are accurate." Vex stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "It does not matter. Whatever they have built, it cannot stand against the combined fleet. All ships advance in standard attack formation. We will destroy their defenses and then burn their planet." The fleet moved forward. On Earth, Admiral Jennifer Wright watched the enemy approach on her tactical display. She was in the command center with Secretary General Thompson and Dr. Rachel Lee. Emma Collins was there too, standing in the corner, watching everything with burning eyes. "They're entering the outer defense perimeter," Wright announced. "All extermination systems are online and ready." Thompson nodded. "Open a communication channel." Wright pressed the button, and suddenly Every ship in the combined fleet could hear the human transmission. Combined Fleet. This is Admiral Jennifer Wright of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have one final opportunity to withdraw. This is not a bluff. This is not a negotiation. Leave now or face the consequences. On the Eternal Judgment, Admiral Vex listened to the human warning with amusement. These creatures have spirit. I will give them that. But spirit alone cannot save them. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their planet. Fire. 10,000 ships unleashed their weapons at once. Beams of energy, missiles of plasma, projectiles of compressed matter streaked toward Earth in a wall of destruction that should have been unstoppable. None of them reached their targets. The first layer of extermination protocol was a defensive screen, a quantum displacement field that surrounded the entire inner solar system. When the combined fleet's weapons entered this field, they simply ceased to exist. They were not destroyed or deflected. They were removed from reality itself. Admiral Vex watched as his entire opening attack vanished like raindrops falling into an ocean. Impossible, he whispered. Admiral, his sensor officer said, his voice trembling. I am detecting launch signatures. Thousands of small objects are deploying from the human defense platforms. Vex looked at his screen and saw what appeared to be clouds of dust spreading throughout the system. But these were not dust. These were drones. Tiny machines barely larger than a human fist, moving at speeds that his sensors could barely track. What are those things? Vex demanded. Before anyone could answer, the drones attacked. They did not use conventional weapons. They did not fire beams or missiles. They simply flew toward the combined fleet ships and touched them, and wherever they touched, matter began to unmake itself. Vex watched in horror as the ships nearest to the drones began to dissolve. It was not an explosion. It was not melting. The ships simply fell apart at the atomic level, their molecules separating and scattering into space like sand blown by the wind. All ships fall back, Vex screamed. Emergency retreat. But the drones were faster than his ships. They swarmed through the fleet like hungry insects, touching one ship after another. Each touch meant death. In the first 4 minutes, 2,000 ships ceased to exist. The combined fleet, the most powerful military force in galactic history, began to panic. Ships broke formation, trying to flee in every direction. Some captains attempted to jump to hyperspace, but the drones followed them, emerging from hyperspace alongside them and continuing their silent destruction. Dr. Rachel Lee watched the battle from the command center, tears streaming down her face. Her father had designed these weapons. He had called them the last resort, the weapons humanity would use only if everything else failed. He had hoped they would never be needed. It's working, she whispered. Father, it's actually working. Admiral Wright's voice was cold and steady. Continue the attack. Do not stop until the threat is eliminated. More drones launched. The swarm grew larger, spreading through the fleeing fleet like a plague. Ships that had conquered entire civilizations were reduced to clouds of atomic particles in seconds. On the Eternal Judgment, Admiral Vex watched his fleet die around him. 8,000 ships gone. 9,000. The readings on his screen were a nightmare of destruction that his mind could not accept. How is this possible? He said to no one. They are primitives. They are insects. How can they do this? His flagship shuddered as drones began landing on its hull. Vex could feel the ship dying beneath his feet, its metal walls turning to dust. Its systems failing one by one. He had just enough time to send one final transmission to the Galactic Council. High Arbiter Thornax. The humans, they have destroyed us. The entire fleet is gone. We never had a chance. They let us come here. They let us attack first. And then the transmission dissolved into static. The eternal judgment fell apart, and Admiral Vex died with it. In the command center on Earth, Admiral Wright watched the last enemy ship dissolve. The battle had lasted less than 30 minutes. 10,000 warships, the combined might of 12 civilizations, had been completely destroyed without a single human casualty. Secretary General Thompson sat down heavily. His face was pale. "My God," he said quietly. "What have we done?" Emma Collins stepped forward. Her eyes were dry now. She had watched the destruction of the fleet that had meant to destroy her world, and she felt nothing but grim satisfaction. "We survived," she said. "That's what we've done. And now the galaxy knows what happens when they threaten humanity." Thompson looked at her, then at the screen showing the debris field where the combined fleet had once been. He understood that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer a young species seeking acceptance. They were something else entirely. They were a power to be feared. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," he said finally. "Tell them what happened. Tell them that our terms have changed. And tell them that if they ever threaten us again, we will not be so merciful." The message was sent, and across the galaxy, civilizations that had ruled the stars for 12,000 years looked at humanity with new eyes. They looked at them with terror. The message from the human system arrived at the Galactic Council Citadel 6 hours after the battle ended. High Arbiter Thornax was in his private chambers when his aide brought him the transmission. He expected news of victory. He expected images of Earth burning. What he received was a recording from Admiral Vex's final moments, showing the complete destruction of the combined fleet. Thornax watched the recording 7 times. Each time, he hoped to see something different. Each time, he saw the same impossible truth. 10,000 ships, gone in less than 30 minutes. Not a single human casualty reported. His crystalline body began to crack. Small fractures appeared along his arms and chest, spreading slowly like ice breaking under pressure. The Vorath did not age like other species. They cracked. And Thornax had just aged 1,000 years in one night. He called an emergency meeting of the council. The chamber was different now. When the council members had last gathered here, they had laughed at humanity's demands. Now they sat in terrified silence, watching recordings of their fleet dissolving into nothing. "This cannot be real," Lady Morinth whispered. Her serpentine body was coiled so tightly she could barely breathe. "This must be some kind of trick." "It is not a trick," Ambassador Kira said quietly. "I told you. I warned you. The humans think differently than we do. They see possibilities that we dismiss as impossible. And now 10,000 ships and their crews are dead because we did not listen." Thornax tried to speak, but his voice came out as broken static. The cracks in his body had spread to his vocal systems. He was dying, slowly falling apart from the inside. Grand Marshal Vectis was not present. He had commanded the combined fleet. He had died with it. "What do we do?" asked Lord Nethys of the Corvan hegemony. His normally proud voice was small and frightened. "If they send their weapons against our homeworlds, we cannot stop them. We saw what happened to the fleet. We have no defense." Before anyone could answer, a new transmission arrived. It was from Earth. "The humans are requesting a meeting," the communication officer announced. "They are sending an envoy. She will arrive in 3 days." "She?" Kira asked. The communication officer checked his data. "Her name is Emma Collins. She was the aide to their murdered ambassador. She is now their chief diplomatic representative." 3 days later, a single human ship arrived at the Citadel. It was small and unarmed, but every species in the galaxy knew what humanity was capable of now. The ship was escorted with more respect than any emperor had ever received. Emma, Collins walked into the council chamber wearing the same uniform that David Park had worn when he died there. She had requested that uniform specifically. She wanted the council to see it. She wanted them to remember. She walked to the petitioner's circle, the same spot where David had stood. She looked up at the council members, and she did not bow. 1 year ago, she began, Ambassador David Park stood where I am standing now. He came in peace. He offered friendship. And you murdered him for it. The council members could not meet her eyes. I watched him die. I watched him push me toward the exit so I could escape. I watched him fall to this floor while your guards shot him in the back. And then I went home and told my people what happened. She paused, letting the silence stretch. You expected us to accept our place. You expected us to stay quiet and obedient while you decided our fate. You thought we were primitives, insects, creatures too young and stupid to threaten the great Galactic Council. Emma smiled. It was not a warm smile. You were wrong. Arbiter Thornax tried to respond, but his voice failed completely. The cracks in his body had spread too far. He was barely holding himself together. Ambassador Kira spoke instead. What do you want from us? Emma turned to face her. Of all the council members, Kira was the only one she respected. Intelligence reports suggested that Kira had tried to warn the council about humanity. She had tried to prevent this disaster. I will tell you what we want, Emma said. We do not want membership in your council. We have no interest in joining a civilization that murders diplomats and calls it justice. Then what? We want acknowledgement. We want the galaxy to know that humanity is not to be threatened, not to be attacked, not to be dismissed. We want every species in this galaxy to understand that if they harm a human, there will be consequences. She pulled out a small device, a holographic projector. She activated it, and the image of David Park appeared, floating in the air before the council. This was a good man, Emma said. He believed in peace. He believed that we could find common ground with the older species of the galaxy. He died for that belief. She looked at each council member in turn. I do not share his faith. I have seen what you are capable of. I have seen how you treat species you consider beneath you. But I will honor his memory by giving you one final chance. She deactivated the projector. Leave humanity alone. Do not enter our space. Do not contact us unless we contact you first. If you follow these rules, we will remain peaceful. We will build our civilization in our own corner of the galaxy, and we will not trouble you. And if we do not follow these rules? Kira asked. Emma's smile disappeared. Then we will do to your homeworlds what we did to your fleet. We will unmake everything you have ever built. Every city, every monument, every trace of your civilizations will be erased from existence. You will not be conquered. You will simply cease to be. The council chamber was silent. You have heard our terms, Emma said. I suggest you accept them. She turned and walked out of the chamber, just as David Park had tried to do 1 year ago. But this time, no one tried to stop her. No guards raised their weapons. The council watched her leave in terrified silence. 1 year later, a memorial stood in Geneva. David Park's name was carved into black stone, along with the words from his final message. Recovered from Emma's escape pod. Tell them we could have been friends. Secretary General Thompson visited the memorial every morning. He would stand before it in silence, thinking about what humanity had become. They had proven they could destroy any threat. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. But was it worth the cost? Had they become the monsters the council always feared? Admiral Wright visited when she could. She would salute the memorial, a sign of respect for a fellow warrior who had given his life for his people. Dr. Rachel Lee came on the anniversary of the battle. She brought flowers and sometimes talked to the memorial, telling David about the world he had helped save. Emma Collins came only once. She stood before the memorial for a long time, reading the inscription over and over. "We could have been friends," she whispered. Then she shook her head. "No, they would never have allowed that. You knew it too, David. You knew they would never accept us. You just hoped you were wrong." She touched the stone gently. "I finished what you started. The galaxy knows who we are now. They fear us. And maybe, someday, that fear will turn into respect. Maybe your dream of friendship will come true after all." She turned and walked away. Behind her, the memorial stood in silence, a reminder of the man who had tried to offer peace and the species that had learned to make war. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as members of the Council, not as friends of the older species, but as a power that could not be ignored, could not be threatened, could not be destroyed. The stars had learned to fear them, and perhaps, in time, they would learn to respect them too. But that was a story for another day.